The international media is reporting a strange story, that is the New York Times, etc., saying that Jeffrey Epstein, this convicted sex offender, also managed to obtain 3 of the holy outer coverings, the tapestries that cover the Kaaba. These are called in Arabic a kiswah. They not only have the embroidered ayats from the Quran, but are also touched by millions of Muslims who go for pilgrimage to Mecca. While they are praying, they are crying, their hopes, their prayers are all incorporated into the body fabric of the kiswah. And the story of how Epstein obtained these coverings is also revelatory. It tells us something about the sordid state of the kingdoms of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The story begins in 2008-9. During that 1-year period, Jeffrey Epstein was in Palm County Jail in Florida because he had been given a very comfortable plea bargain for much lesser charges than he was actually accused of. This plea bargain was just for soliciting prostitution, whereas what he had been accused of was sex with an underage girl of 13 or 14 whose mother had taken him to court for having sex with her child and trying to prostitute her. He got this plea bargain because he had been serving the CIA, the Mossad, etc., and had connections with the higher levels of the US government. And as powerful men usually get their way, he too got a much more lenient jail term than he deserved. While he was in jail for this 1-year period, he felt like building an Middle Eastern or Islamic structure on his little Caribbean island called Little St. James. Here he wanted to build a structure which he sometimes called a hammam. At other times he referred to it as his mosque, a music room. The basic design was copied from a 14th, 15th century Syrian hammam with the same kind of golden Syrian dome. The tiles to cover the interior were obtained from Uzbekistan. But the most prized item in this was this kiswah. And he had 3 pieces of it. The story really takes off around 2014-15 when he contacted a Norwegian diplomat who was close to the Saudi crown. And the reason for this was that Saudi Aramco, the principal oil company of the kingdom, was about to have its IPO. He knew this would be billions of dollars and he might get millions in commission if he could become a financial advisor to Prince
Mohammed bin Salman,
who was effectively the ruler by then. Well, those plans didn't work out. But through the Norwegian diplomat, he was able to get in touch with a guy called Rafat al-Sabah, who was a consultant to the royal court, and to his assistant, a lady called Aziza al-Ahmadi. Emails and documents which have been declassified in January revealed that she sent him an email saying that I'm sending you 3 pieces. One is the kiswah, the outer covering of the Kaaba. One is a tapestry which is kept inside the Kaaba. And the third is from the same workshop in Mecca where this kiswah is produced. But that third piece had not been draped on the Kaaba. Now this lady, Aziza al-Ahmadi, was fully aware of the sanctity of this cloth because she said that this black piece was touched by a minimum of 10 million Muslims of different denominations, Shias, Sunnis, etc., who walk around the Kaaba 7 rounds, each one trying as much as possible to touch it. And they have kept their prayers, wishes, tears, and hopes on this piece, hoping after that all their prayers will be accepted. For those who may not be aware, this kiswah is approximately $5 million in cost. It is in Indian currency about 46 crore Indian rupees. It consists of about 700 kilograms of silk, 114 kilograms of gold and silver thread wire, and hundreds of workers work on it for over a year to produce it in that workshop. This covering is changed every year. Once it has been removed, it can be auctioned for charity or cut up into pieces and sent to institutions, sometimes to individuals. But the question one inevitably thinks of is how did this holy piece of cloth come into the hands of an individual who was a convicted sex offender? I mean, the problem is not that it was sent outside. It could have been sent to an institution, a museum. But the fact is that the Saudi and Emirati crowns think of this as their property. As you can see in this photograph, the head of Dubai Ports World is examining this piece of holy cloth at Epstein's place at his mansion in New York. This is Sultan Ahmed bin Sulaim, who was the head of DP World. But it's also reflected in the title that the Saudi king has given to himself. He calls himself the custodian of the two holy shrines. He's not the custodian. The Arabic word is Qadiman Haraman Sharifan. That is the servant of the two holy shrines. We have seen the reprobate behavior of these sultans and these kings. As you know,
Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan,
the ruler of UAE, has been supporting the genocidal paramilitary forces in Sudan, the rebel forces in Libya, and he's been supporting Israel throughout its genocide of the Gazans. In fact, he has even invited Israeli troops into the UAE to set up the Iron Dome, which is helping, they claim, to protect them from Iranian attacks. But why might have Epstein been so interested in these fully Islamic relics? And I think I have some idea. Muslims believe that the Kaaba is the house of God. In fact, they call it Baytullah. Bayt meaning house, a house of Allah. They believe that Ibrahim, that's Abraham and Ishmael, built it in prehistoric times. But then it was converted into a temple, and the Prophet Muhammad again repurified it. Yes, it is true that about 360 idols, according to Islamic sources, were kept inside the Kaaba. That is, it was a holy place even before the birth of Islam. Included inside was the chief god of Mecca, that is Hubble. There was also an image of Mary, the mother of Christ, with baby Jesus in her lap. There was also a statue of Ibrahim, divination arrows in front of him. According to some versions, these arrows were in his hand. That is, these arrows would tell you the future when you disperse them in the ground. Each of these 360 idols belonged to a tribe. That tribe would come once a year in a group, remove the idols, and carry them in a circumambulation around the Kaaba. By some accounts, this would happen once a year. By others, it could happen twice a year. Therefore, Mecca was a holy religious town, and this is encapsulated in its name. It is called Haram Sharif, the area of the Kaaba and the mosque around it. Haram meaning forbidden. That is, all weapons, all warfare was forbidden within 20 miles, approximately 32 kilometers of the Kaaba. Because it was so protected, it also was a trading town. That is, in the ancient world, temple towns, religious towns were also trading towns. And that's how the Mecca became an important location, a religious town, but also a pilgrimage and trading town. Therefore, a tax was charged when anybody crossed its boundary, when any tribe came in. That is, the Hajj was the primary source of revenue for the tribe that controlled Mecca, that is the Quraysh, to a branch of which Prophet Muhammad's own family belonged. This branch is called the Banu Hashim. But as you know, Prophet Muhammad and the early Muslims were persecuted in Mecca. They went off to Medina in migration, and then they reconquered the city. This happened around 630. When Prophet Muhammad came back, he took out all the idols from the Kaaba. The story is he left behind just one image of Mary with her child Jesus and another image of Abraham. Everything else was removed, and the Hajj continued as always. That is, Muslims would come and take 7 counterclockwise circumambulations of the Kaaba. This Hajj would happen once a year, but people could visit any time and do the same rituals. It would then be called the Umrah, another smaller pilgrimage. But interestingly, in the pre-Islamic Arabia, there was not one Kaaba, there were many Kaabas. In fact, the Kaaba just means cube in Old Arabic. And so you could have several temples ranging from Yemen all the way up to Syria. Some places were made into mosques after Islam came, that is in Yemen. In other places, they became churches. In other places, they were demolished. But later in Sufi practices, the location of Kaaba came to be considered the axis mundi, that is the center of the world, and some people even considered the center of the universe. What was important was not the building of the Kaaba. That is, the Kaaba has been destroyed and rebuilt several times. What is important is the holy ground on which it stands. We know that Jeffrey Epstein was very interested in the occult. And so maybe the interest in the Kaaba was because of its significance in Sufi occult practices. Many people believe that Muslims worship the Kaaba. That's not true. Muslims worship in the direction of the Kaaba. And early on in Prophet Muhammad's prophethood, Muslims actually faced Jerusalem and they faced Al-Aqsa in order to pray. That doesn't mean they were worshipping Al-Aqsa itself. That is, when Muslims pray, they are not asking the Kaaba for something. They're still worshipping Allah, they're still worshipping one God. In fact, the Kaaba is supposed to represent Tawheed, the oneness of divinity and of this universe. In fact, the Kaaba had been destroyed even before the arrival of Islam in a flood, and it was reconstructed. And there is a story around this about how Prophet Muhammad managed to do a small piece of conflict resolution. That is, when the Kaaba was being reconstructed, there is a black meteorite stone which is still there at one of its corners. There was a dispute among the various sub-tribes of the Quraysh as to who would place that black stone. Prophet Muhammad came up with a solution that the black stone, the meteorite, would be placed on a piece of cloth. Each tribe would hold a corner and would carry it to its location, where the Prophet Muhammad himself would place it by his hands in the foundations. I know of at least 4 occasions on which the Kaaba was destroyed. The first was around the 680s AD, when there was a civil war in the Muslim world. The area of the Hijaz, the Mecca, Medina area is called the Hijaz, was controlled by Abdullah bin Zubair, whereas the larger Islamic world was controlled by the Umayyad Caliphate. In the siege of Mecca during that period, the Kaaba was burned down because of incendiary projectiles. A few years later, again in 693, there was another siege. This time it was successful, and again the Kaaba suffered damage because stone catapults were brought and stones rained down on it. This time it was rebuilt by the Caliph Abdul Malik, the son of Marwan. He was a very historic caliph because he also built the first Islamic building, which is not the Kaaba because it was pre-Islamic. The first Islamic building was the Dome of the Rock. That was built by Abdul Malik, and you can see the distinctive style of Islamic architecture emerges for the first time, and the Quranic verses around it proclaim the Wahadat, the unity of God. It says God is not many but one, God is not three, specifically referring to the Christian Trinity. It says God is not three but one. You can see the formation of a distinctive Islamic community. Until then, the Muslims had not thought of themselves as very distinct from the Christians or even of the Jews. But since both of these communities did not accept Muslims or Prophet Muhammad as their prophet, now Muslims, more confident with their conquests and their empire, were carving a separate identity and started also referring to themselves as Muslims. Earlier, in the Quran and other places, they used to refer to themselves as Mu'mins. The Quran was again attacked in the 10th century.
The Kaaba was again damaged in 930 CE during an attack
By a group of heretic Ismailites who controlled the Arabian side of the Persian Gulf. What are today the GCC countries from Kuwait to Oman were controlled by them. They invaded the Kaaba. They defiled the holy well of Zamzam by slaughtering pilgrims and throwing them inside. And they stole the black rock, the Sange Aswad. This was then brought back by the Abbasids. That is the dynasty which replaced the Umayyads. This dynasty managed to bring back the black rock and again install it in the Kaaba. Finally, the Kaaba was again destroyed in the 1600s, I think around 1623, when there was a big flood in Mecca. And the interesting thing is that the keys of the Kaaba have been kept by the same Bani Shaiba family since about the 6th century, even before the arrival of Islam. The Bani Shaiba were a sub-branch of the Quraysh. They always had the keys. They would do the cleaning, the caretaking of the Kaaba. So when Prophet Muhammad conquered Mecca and arrived at the Kaaba, the head of the family requested him that they be allowed to continue keeping the keys. And graciously, Prophet Muhammad said that you can keep the keys of the Kaaba, take care of it until the day of judgment. And even today, when the Kaaba is cleaned, it is opened by the Bani Shaiba family. In their supervision, the cleaning is done. This is somewhat similar to the story of the keys of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. That is the holiest church in Christendom, where Jesus Christ is supposed to have been crucified, according to the Christians. Now you would be surprised that the keys of this church are kept by 2 Muslim Palestinian families, because the various denominations of the church, the various sects of Christendom, that is the Armenian Christians, the Eastern Orthodox, the Catholics, the Coptics, Nestorians, etc., they could not agree on who should keep the keys. Hence it was decided about 1,000 years ago that it would be handed over to these Palestinian Muslim family. Even today, they go in the morning and open the church, and in the night, they lock it. But coming back to Epstein, and his possession or purchase of these holy tapestries. It is surprising that it hasn't been a bigger issue, not just in the whole world, but at least within the Islamic world. And this shows you the power of these Gulf Arab monarchs, their unaccountability, and their level of corruption. In fact, if you know, in Islam, monarchy and kingship are not approved of, but because the Quran does not specify any given political form, even in this 21st century, these super rich Gulf monarchs are able to justify themselves as Islamic. And they face no accountability for their misdeeds, for their human rights violations, for their murder of journalists like Mr. Khashoggi, and even for their sale of the holy Kiswa. So until next time, please keep watching, liking, and subscribing to my channel. As you know, when you like a particular video, the YouTube algorithm pushes it up, and subscription will give us more visibility. So if you find it of value, please like, subscribe, and until next time, goodbye.